Today is May 30th, 2019, and we are speaking with Tazbah Gaussoin from Picaris, Pueblo in northern New Mexico. We are joined by our videographer, Dr. Beverly Senior, and our project interns, Jonna Payton and Valerie Fernando. The interview is being conducted by Rose Diaz, IPCC coordinator. Tazbah is but one of the recognized artists in her family whose parents are Connie Sosi, Picaris and Navajo, and Jerry Gaussoin, Sr. Connie, the family's matriarch, was heavily influenced by her father's work as a Native American artist at the famous Meisel stores in Albuquerque. His brother, Tom, focused on his work in the old traditional ways, perfecting a system for using tufa stones in his creations. Her brother Jerry has served in the military in Germany, Kosovo, and Iraq, and his works have incorporated features of his international travels and visions in his work. David stretches the boundaries of his jewelry, but also finds creativity in innovative materials and techniques that encompass the entire body. Wayne works in a variety of media, including sculpture and jewelry, fashion design with non-conventional materials, particularly aluminum and found objects.
We're really pleased that you could join us today. And I'd like to start by asking a few questions about your early years, not so long ago. I'd like to ask about, coming home and especially coming home as, in a way, a new bride. Right. Can you tell us something about what your reflections have been about your young life, growing up, your parents, your siblings, your grandparents?
Yeah, I grew up in Santa Fe, just like a normal kid, but my parents would always incorporate, especially like my mother, and bringing us up in the traditional manner, with going to Picaris, Pueblo, for ceremonies and dances throughout the year, and my dad was always very supportive. I believe when I was like about 13 years old, I even had Canalda out on the Navajo Reservation. So it was both Pueblo and Navajo that were incorporated. Yeah, my grandparents were always there and always like trying to teach us like the language as much as we would listen.
What are your most vivid recollections of either life on the Pueblo or on Navajo Reservation when you were visiting there? What kinds of things, do you think about most vividly in your mind connects you to that place, to those places?
Well, definitely growing up, we'll go there even now we'll go there every year for our feast day on August 10th for San Lorenzo. And I can remember dancing since I could walk. I would dance with my mom. Usually just remembering like all the women that were there serving and in the kitchen cooking, and even the men now today too. Just our family really gets together, and just remembering like going to hang out with like my friends from different families, growing up and just being a kid. But now today it's interesting, it's just seeing like how roles have changed. So like now my mom and my grandmother aren't in the kitchen anymore. It's myself, and even my husband and my brothers will help out in the kitchen, and but also participate with the dances. And
Were your experiences similar on the Navajo Reservation?
We would go out there not as frequently, just because it was a little bit further. We would go out as much as we could, and my grandpa's family, they live out in Cottonwood, Arizona, kind of near Chinle, and we would go and hike like Canyon de Chelly, and they would on the way out, like my grandpa would tell us stories about his upbringing out there. And also my mother my grandparents would send my mother and her sisters out to the Navajo Res during the summers So also just listening to her stories and her experiences, and it was really cool. I remember just like hanging out there and just hiking and walking around and just learning about the land and our family. And
so if you were approaching Pico de Pueblo, what would be the first things that would remind you were home?
Like driving, I mean, it's just the valley, like being in the mountains, and that real like cool fresh mountain air is first of all what greets you, and then also the bison that are there, and then when we're at our house at the Pueblo is kind of on top of a hill, or I guess they're like old ruins now. It's because our Pueblo used to be like 8 stories high, but they were demolished, so now that's what we live on today, in our like modern houses. But our house is on one of the top hills there, and when you're standing outside of the house, there's this like huge crater on one of the mountains, and that definitely like reminds me of home.
You're here.
Yeah.
Finally home.
Yes.
Outside of your family, did you find a mentor that most influenced you in school or community?
Right now, I would say I have a mentor, Cynthia Chavez Lamar. She's San Felipe, Hopi Tewa, and Navajo. I'm currently working at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, and she's really guided me and helped me basically get into the role of the museum career that I've always aspired to be in, and I really appreciate like her guidance.
Early on as a mentor?
Oh yeah, my mother, for sure. My mother has always been an incredible mentor, and even my brothers and my father, they all really have been really encouraging with education, and that was always really important to the family. Even my grandfather, Carl Sosi Sr., he really encouraged education, and so it's been really incredible watching my mother all these years, to be able to maintain like the traditional side, but also to bring awareness of Native peoples and all the different boards that she's been on. And yeah, she was like state fair commissioner for a while, a governor's appointed position, and yeah, just watching her in her various roles, and even now as a caretaker for my father, she's been through it all.
Great. In what mediums are you currently engaged in your artwork?
Honestly, it's been a while since I've really been working on anything, as I've been focusing on my career in the museum field, but I guess most recently dabbling in silversmithing. I learned from, it's kind of funny, all my brothers learned from my mother, and I guess I did in a way, but I actually took a class with my brother David at the Santa Fe Community College and also at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I would go home and with my projects that my brother gave us in class, and my mother would guide me through those, and also even my brother Wayne Nez would also help me in the studio, and just learning from them is really incredible. And I also working in like fashion design and draping, and I've collaborated on many pieces with my brothers on that in the past.
And we've been very interested in that sort of postmodern look.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to that soon. You talked about getting into textile work and, fabric. Can you explain to us a little bit about what that is?
When I first started working with textiles was after my Canalda. My aunts out on the Navajo Reservation, Lita and Sammy John, they believed it was important to learn how to weave Navajo rugs. So they would come out to Santa Fe from Chinle, and they would, in the summers, they would teach me how to weave rugs. And from that, I really grew to love working with materials like that. And my brothers David and Wayne, and even my mother. I don't even know when this was. Maybe, I think they started working in fashion shows in the Santa Fe area when I was about 13 years old. I remember this was like before I started high school, and just watching them prepare their models and all the extravagant jewelry that they would wear. But then my brother David and Wayne wanted to start dressing their own models. And so my brother David had learned how to embroider and sew from our grandmother Lydia, and so he was trying to sew and basically just like draping material on our models. And he was the one that suggested I go take a class at the Santa Fe Community College in fashion design and draping, or pattern making, and draping. And so that's where it kind of started.
You participated in curatorial and exhibition preparation. What did you find most interesting in that work, and how is it guiding you into that path?
Yeah, so I was an intern at the New Mexico Museum of Art in Santa Fe under Mary Scully as an intern in the curatorial department. And that was just really interesting working, and even with that, I think that was like the first time I was working with like non-native museum institutions, and just learning about like different creative processes for artists, but then also learning, that's when I was really learning about like the museum side and what goes into preparing exhibitions, and that really prepared me for the experience that I've also learned at the National Museum of the American Indian, and helping to install the exhibit, our current exhibit, Americans. It's a really interesting process, and all the research that really goes into creating an exhibit, from every little detail.
How did you make that move from New Mexico to DC?
Yeah, so I graduated from the Institute of American Indian Arts with my BFA in Museum Studies in May of 2016, and I was interning at the National Hispanic Cultural Center in Albuquerque, and I remember, I believe it was my senior year at IAIA, that I went to a symposium, or kind of a discussion that I was invited to, that was at the School of Advanced Research in Santa Fe. I ran into, and I had kind of known her before, but that's when I like really officially met Cynthia Chavez-Lamar, and also the head of the conservation department, Marian Kamnitz, at National Museum of the American Indian. And so I sent my resume because I was really interested in wanting to intern there, and so they told me if any opportunities had arisen that they would let me know. And so that's when I was interning at National Hispanic Cultural Center, and I received an email from Cynthia Chavez-Lamar, and she said that there was an opportunity that had come up. So I went through the whole hiring process. Yeah, I was hired on as a 2-year term employee in the community loans program.
So now you've worked in the creating of exhibitions that I'm sure focus on Native and Indigenous people. Mm-hmm. How do those kinds of conversations come to a compromise?
Or the most recent exhibit that we have on right now is called Americans. It was all planned before I was came on board. And I really just only helped with the installation. I don't know, I guess I don't really have a whole lot of experience with like creating exhibits other than my senior thesis, my last year at the Institute of American Indian Arts. That was based on my senior thesis.
And that's the kind of thing I'm trying to get at, is how does your Indigenous perspective mm-hmm. help you build those kinds of shows or exhibits?
You definitely have to take into perspective about, just like from our upbringing, there's some things that you share and there's some things you don't, and so you really have to take it into account on what you are able to share, and mostly it's a lot of guidance from like family and even like the Pueblos, or our Pickeries Pueblo in my instance. Yeah.
Do you find any boundaries that the people above you, supervisors, or that they just can't seem to understand?
Fortunately, I really have like supervisors where I'm at right now they really understand, and there's really no like there's no boundaries, or like there's no like walls that are like that no like anyone can really get past. They're all really understanding and really respectful towards Indigenous peoples, and are really just mostly like listening ears. Like they want to listen to the communities themselves and what they're wanting to share.
How does your individual work, and I'm talking about, the collaborations with your brothers especially, how does that work how does that fit into a postmodern world where you're trying to express that postmodernism, but still with a cultural affiliation? How does that process work?
Yeah, I think mostly through like symbolism. A lot of the work that I've collaborated with all my brothers has been based off of symbolism, but like some of the dresses I've created, they have like the one shoulder like a manta, but it's not. It's my own interpretation with what I learned in school from my draping classes, and but also to honor those who have come before us, to be able to represent like those both sides, because I'm also part French on my father's side. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of different influences in my family.
I would imagine even just between brothers and sisters, there are differences that need to we need to understand each other in that way.
Yeah.
So the negotiation is still there. Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely. And usually we really always go to our mother, who will really help us like work things out.
She's the arbiter of
exactly.
What and who inspires the work that you do?
I mean, right now, working in museums, it's the communities that I engage with during tours or research or visits. Really just learning from them. I mean, I know growing up in the Southwest, like knowing the history of like the Pueblos and Southwest tribes, but once it gets out of that, I've kind of didn't really learn a whole lot or accurate history about that. So having them come in and learning that knowledge firsthand from them has been really inspiring, and just learning how to take care of the objects from their community directly from them has really been encouraging in what I'm doing in the collections management.
How do you do that consultation with communities?
They have their own projects within their communities, and they will contact us to come and want to do research. As far as like the community loans program, it's a grant-funded program through the Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies that I'm currently working with. It's a partnership, a loan partnership between the National Museum of American Indian and also tribally owned museums. So as far as that, we're community loans, we're the ones that are engaging with the communities.
Are communities receptive to that? Are they, oftentimes when you deal with Washington, just the word Washington seems to alienate people in our communities. Does your program seem to do that in the beginning, and then you have to sort of work through that?
No, I mean, we're very like open about what we're wanting to do, and as far as we'll invite them out to like the Cultural Resources Center where our collections are housed, and show them the housing facility, and showing them how we're taking care of their objects. It's just a lot of communication is really what it is, open communication, and so far they really seem to appreciate it, and they're really excited about the loans that are.
What kind of responses do you get? Do you have an example?
I mean, I came in kind of at the end of, there's currently our first partnership is with the Poe Cultural Center in Pewaukee. Just seeing that they, just the communications there are really open. It was kind of like when I came in at the end, so it was already pre like Cynthia and Tessa Schultz. They had already like started that collaboration partnership.
What do you see in those leaders that you want to emulate?
Yeah, I really appreciate the respect that I see that they have towards Native communities and all Native communities. This is including like even like throughout the Western Hemisphere, from our like from South, even like down through South America and up into Canada as well, and Greenland, and just the respect that they have for them and like the listening ears. I really appreciate that, and I've learned so much from that alone. And then also not just like listening to what they have, but also like following up with community requests.
What challenges and boundaries did you encounter early on, both in your artistic work, and then later on in, if any, in the museum world?
Growing up, I was really fortunate that I didn't really have too many boundaries. I mean, my brothers kind of had already paved the path for me when it came to my turn. I went to school at like a private Catholic high school in Santa Fe, and like being asked to kind of help teach about like Pueblo history or Navajo history was definitely kind of like just kind of set me back a little bit, because I mean a lot, like even like I said earlier, with learning about cultures and tribes outside of the Four Corners areas, it's not really accurate information that's put out there. But so when I went to IAIA, it was definitely more eye-opening, and even learning from like other students about their cultures and their traditions was really incredible. No, I haven't really had too many instances where I've had, I guess I've been really lucky. Yeah.
And you did some modeling for a while?
Yeah,
Tell us about that experience.
I started modeling actually when I was about 13 years old. I think my first fashion show was with my family, had asked me to participate, and it was at the Mokna's in their sculpture garden, and that was really cool. I think that was like right before I started high school. And then from there, I was asked by different Native designers to model for them. So like Patricia Michaels, Pilar Goyo. And it was an incredible time to do that, and it was a lot of fun. And also just to see like their symbolism and their like I don't know, just like the traditions, like or like the symbolism, like Native symbolism on these contemporary works, and even to see my brothers David and Wayne were part of an exhibit called Native Fashion Now, and it was like a modern boa that they made out of steel that was really cool, that I modeled in the past. Just to see that like on exhibit was really cool.
What did you gain from that modeling experience personally?
It was definitely learning how to work with a lot of different people. And then even from that, once I stopped modeling, I really helped my family out with putting on the fashion shows and like calling models or setting up hair and makeup. So a lot of like coordination and communication with different people. Yeah.
Did you feel like it helped your confidence to move to that next level of producing stuff?
Yeah, definitely. And even with that experience, like that like volunteer work I used, I'll put that on like my resume, because that's a lot of work to coordinate all these people.
one of the big issues in Indian country right now is the cultural appropriation. And this works especially in fashion, which is very significant to tribal communities, and tribal communities are now, fighting back. How do you feel about that issue?
I guess it just goes back to the Americans exhibit that we have on right now at the National Museum of American Indian. Kind of really highlights that native stereotype, and realizing how much native imagery is in today's society, and like from Land O'Lakes butter to football or sports mascots. It's not cool. And people just try to brush it off like it's no big deal, and that's really frustrating.
What's your response when something like that comes up personally for you?
Yeah, just try to educate people as much. Like, I don't really want to I really try not to have tension. I mean, because some people just really don't know, and so just to try and educate as much as I can, or try to give resources of where they can look into more information on learning about this issue.
Previous narrators have noted the need for mentorships in communities, especially with students, and how can communities be more proactive in that? I mean, you're probably one of the youngest people that we've interviewed, and so you're closest to that group that we're trying to say, these are role models that you can build up to. So coming from that perspective of mentoring, what would you have benefited from, or what do you think of a mentorship process?
I definitely think it's important to have those mentors, and even within for the youth to be able to see Native peoples represented as these mentors, and coming from their own communities is really important. Contacting various organizations here in the state that they can just even to ask for internships and stuff like that. That's kind of basically what I did, just kind of working your way in.
You've been working kind of in this world of throwing yourself out there since you were 13 or so. What holds back people from doing that? What do you think holds back people?
Personally, it may not seem like it now, but I'm a pretty shy person when it comes to meeting new people. I don't know what that's from, whether it be cultural, or maybe even just having older brothers who are always
three brothers.
Yeah, my mother. So I don't really know, but that was kind of one of the hardest things for me to overcome personally, is just learning how to speak up, and not being afraid to speak your voice.
Yeah, great, thank you. Personal, but not personal. How do you define your role as a Pueblo woman representing your community?
I just try to represent and my strong ancestors, and even today community members, and just bring awareness and educate people as much as I can about about Picary's Pueblo, or what I've learned from my grandfather's side with Dene. But, just trying to be true to yourself. And
do you have a story that sort of comes with that from Picary's? Something that you kind of hold in the back of your head?
Yeah, I mean, as far as my senior thesis at IIA was about an archaeological dig that happened in the 60s. And I just wanted to bring awareness to that, because I thought it was really important, not just for my own Pueblo, but I mean, many other different tribes too have had issues with museums and archaeologists in the past, just to also educate people about the history of Picary's Pueblo. I talked to my grandmother a lot, and even my uncles, and even my mother when I was when I was working on that project, and just because I was still pretty young, so I wanted to make sure that like information that I was putting out there was accurate, and that was really important to me.
What were the results to you on that thesis?
I really got, because I even created like an exhibit off of it. It was called Bon Achipa Huchia, and I really got really positive feedback from that. I mean, I even had people at the opening come up to me like in tears, and just very like emotional about it, like appreciative towards bringing light to these issues.
So what was the issue that was your thesis?
Basically, the archaeologists that they were working with, because of our history, we knew that there would be human remains that they would come across, and I guess it was basically promised that the archaeologists would say, yeah, we'll just rebury them, and that ended up not happening. And so it wasn't until MAGPRO was passed in 1990 and the tribe was contacted and said that they were by various federal institutions saying that they had human remains from our Pueblo. And at first I no, that we were there, we saw and what happened, but that wasn't the case. So that was kind of unfortunate, the history on that.
Well, I think it's interesting coming from that background that you choose to go into museums and museum exhibitions, because you're on the other side in some ways. Many of us that have gone into history and archaeology and all of those, you're trying to right wrong, but can that be done?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's why it's important for more Native peoples to go into these positions in museums, because from my personal experience, I know there's some things that you have to do with certain objects and that's just knowledge that I just have from growing up. I've always heard also that it's important, there's a need for Native peoples in the conservation department, also for those reasons. It's good to acknowledge that history and what has happened in the past, and also to move forward from that and to figure out what we can do to work with our Native peoples and their communities to help protect their objects. And from so far from what I've seen is, they're even really appreciative to have these objects in our collections, because otherwise, with our histories, they may have not even been there at all.
That's true. Talk us through one of your days.
Yeah, so I actually just recently secured a permanent position. Yes, I work both in the collections management and with the object and archives collections. My day could be anything from helping out with a tour or researchers, Native, non-Native peoples coming in from all over the world, really. Also, recently with my new position in archives, I have been going through our photo collections, having those that aren't restricted available for access on our website, I guess.
Well, let's start from 9 to 5. What do you do? What happens?
All right, so I walk in. After I get through all the crazy DC traffic, cool off for a second. I'll check emails right away. Usually with our tours, we'll open, and these are pre-scheduled tours that we have, or researchers are open at about 9 o'clock, so I can help out with those. Usually we have a morning meeting also about 9 o'clock with the collections department. And then I'll take a quick 30-minute lunch and then get back in there, and I'll start processing our photo archives or even paper archives, storage rehousing, and building boxes for our objects out of blue board, or even rehousing our photo archives and putting them, finding a spot for them and putting them back within their communities area that we have in the collections.
And you go.
Yeah, and then I deal with the traffic
And
again.
then do it again another day. Well, I think that's important to know what you do because that's why internships are important, right?
Yeah.
So that you can get a sense of what that person is doing.
Yeah.
People think archives is a very glamorous position. We're archivists here.
Yeah.
And in many cases, it's not that glamorous. I mean, it's tedious but if, you have the opportunity to make the history.
Yeah.
The history that gets written is because the archivists have made that happen. And so I think that's a really invaluable thing that gets done. And so I applaud your efforts in that, and happy to hear that you have a permanent job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you all as well.
Where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
Oh man, I don't really know. I plan to stay within collections management. I really like the work that I'm doing now, and if I can work my way up that that ladder, that would be great. Also, if I could find something back home too, that would be even more incredible. I really would like to use what I've learned to bring back to the communities here, or even to bring them out east or out to other museums and institutions.
How long have you been with the institution?
Yeah, so I've been at the Smithsonian for about almost 2 years now. Yeah.
And how many, do they get very many Native interns?
Yeah, a good amount. Even a good amount of our staff are Native peoples. I mean, I guess the collections department really hasn't had a whole lot of internship opportunities, but recently they've opened that back up, and now we'll have a Native intern this summer. And even throughout the different, not just like our collections department, but other departments as well, like in special events. Like I've known a couple interns there.
Get your foot in the door.
Exactly, yeah. And then that's exactly like really important, even if it's just like an unpaid. I mean, I've done so many like unpaid internships, which sucks, but you're able to use that experience on your resume and really build your resume that way. People at those institutions, like, they know your face and you know their faces, and that's how just networking is really important. Yeah.
In a general sense, what would you advise young Pueblo people today growing up in the worlds that they're growing up with? For example, people, students, young people from your community.
I think it's important to recognize and continue to learn the history and the language, and also teach those younger generation. And then also education is really important. Definitely continue with your education, and then also travel the world and take in as much as you can, and also just bring that back to your community and use that there as well. I think it's really important.
Great.
Yeah.
And our final question is, or maybe two final questions. Have you been a beauty contest winner?
No.
We've been surprised by a couple. So now we're asking. And finally, is there anything that we've asked you that you would like to address, either professionally or personally, that you think would be helpful to young people viewing your video?
Just definitely for the youth to contact these institutions, whether it be for educational purposes. Don't be afraid to ask or contact like other archives or collections for research, and just continue to keep learning.
Is it helpful to work through your tribe for those kinds of things?
Yeah, definitely. Or even like just firsthand, like go ahead and contact these people. It's really easy, like Google search to see who's working in these positions, and I
think that's something that we've heard throughout these, is that people are afraid to ask, but if you don't ask, you're not going to get anything. So,
Yeah.
just don't be afraid.
Yeah, don't be afraid, and really just keep pursuing that, because if one person tells you no, then find someone else, and just keep finding your way through like a little fish. I don't know myself, but it's cute.
Well, now you're a fish in a big pond now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we can call on you.
Come find me. I'll try and help you however I can.
Well, thank you for taking time for us today. I know it was a kind of a rushed deal today, but we really wanted to get your impressions. What we're looking at is, contemporary women who are on the move,
Yeah.
having their own journeys, creating their own pathways. And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.